In this video, I am going to teach you how to solve quadratic equations by factoring. Okay, we're going to use a really simple procedure. We're going to go through it step by step of how to do it. Okay, so let's take a look at the first one here. You got 4x squared, take away ax is 0. We're solving for x. Find out what x is. Okay, so let's take a look at the procedure. First thing we have to do is to move all terms to one side and set the equation equals to 0. Okay, all of the terms are on one side and you have 0 on the other side. Okay, so therefore you do not have to do step 1. Okay, it's done for you. Okay, so again, step 1 is done. Let's move on to step 2. So step 2 is to factor. Okay, so we're going to factor this quadratic expressions on the left hand side. Okay, now notice there's no c, there's no constant in this factor. If you look at the 4x squared and the ax, there is a common factor, greatest common factor in this case. Okay, we're going to factor this by taking out greatest common factor. Okay, so what is the greatest common factor for these two terms? Well, 4 and 8, 4 is the greatest number. 4 is the biggest number that can go into 4 and 8. So we're going to pull a 4 out. And they both have at least an x. So you got x squared and then you have an x. Okay, so we're going to pull out an x. 4x is your greatest common factor. We pulled it out. So when we pull it out, 4x goes into 4x squared. You're left with x. 4x goes into ax is 2. Okay, so and then equals to 0. Now you can check by multiplying the 4x using the distributive property. And if you do, you get 4x squared minus 8x, which is this. So that is step 2. Step 3 is to set each factor equals to 0. And then solve each one for the x value. Okay, so 4x is one of the factors. So we're going to go 4x equals to 0. And then x minus 2 is the other factor. So we're going to go x minus 2 equals to 0. So here when we solve this, we divide by 4. Divide by 4. X is 0 over 4, 4 goes into 0, 0 times. And then here you would have to add 2, right, to get the x by itself. Add 2, so your x is going to be 2. And then the last thing we have to do is to write it as a solution set. So x is, okay, you're going to have solution set, and 0 is one of the solutions. And then 2 is the other one. Okay, so there you go. X is 0 and 2. Okay, let's take a look at another one. Example 2 here. Okay, we're going to solve this quadratic equation by factoring. So this is a little bit different compared to the last one. Okay, this one has 3 terms. Okay, you have the x squared term, the x term, and a constant. Okay, so we're going to factor this into 2 binomials. So step 1 is to move all terms to one side and set the equation equals to 0. So if you look, all of the terms are on one side and you have 0 on the other side. So you do not have to do step 1. Step 2 is we have to factor this. Okay, now this is a little bit different, okay, compared to the last example. Okay, this one has 3 terms. Okay, the last one has 2 terms. If you look at these 3 terms, okay, your greatest common factor is a 1, so you do not have to pull it out, okay? It doesn't matter. All right, so we're going to try to factor this into 2 binomials. So what binomial times another binomial is 0? Okay, so to come up with the numbers for it, here's what you're going to do, okay? See how you have your A is 1, right? Your B is negative 10. And your C is 21. Okay, I hope you guys are able to see that. See the a is 1 right here. It's the coefficients of x squared. So there's your a. Okay, this is your b right here. And then this is your c, okay, in standard form. All right, so to come up with the binomials, you need to come up with two factors that when you multiply, okay, it comes out to a times c. So a times c is 21. And then those two factors have to add up to b. b is negative 10. Okay, so you have to come up with factors of 21. Two numbers multiply to get 21. But when you add those two numbers, it comes out to negative 10. All right, so think of factors of 21, right? So factors of 21, how about we try 7 and 3? Okay, how about we try 7 times 3? Right, so 7 times 3 is 21, yes, but when you take 7 plus 3, you get a positive 10 and not a negative 10. Okay, so we're going to need these two numbers to be both negative, right? So when you add them, you get negative 10. So the two numbers are negative 7 and negative 3. So we're going to use those two numbers, and we're going to write it out as factor form. So the first factor is going to be x minus 7 because it's negative 7. And then the other one is x minus 3. So those are the two factors. Okay, so if you multiply these two factors, it's going to come out to this. The reason why we can just use these two numbers and write it out as factor form is because your a is 1. Okay, this is when a is 1. Now, if a is not 1, then we have to do it other ways. All right, so that is step number 2. Let's take a look at step 3. Step 3 is to set each factor equals to 0. So we have two factors. All right, we have the x minus 7 and then the x minus 3. X minus 7 is 0. And then the other one is x minus 3 is 0. Okay, and then we solve, you get, what's this one? You add 7, so you get 7 for this one. And then here, when you add 3, you get x to be 3. Okay, so those are the two answers. And then the last thing we have to do is to write it out as a solution set. So your x is 3 and 7. So those are your two answers for this one. Okay, let's take a look at another one. We're going to solve this by factoring, and we have a procedure of how to do that. Let's take a look at step 1. Move all terms to one side and set the equation equals to 0. So we have 0 on the right hand side. We do not have to move anything from right to left or left to right. So step 1 is all done. So you're going to factor this trinomial. Now the differences between this trinomial and the previous one is that this one has a leading coefficient of greater than 1. Okay, last time we had a 1, now we have a 6. Okay, so you're going to do it a little bit differently. So we're going to factor again. We're going to factor this into two binomials. A binomial times another binomial give you this 6x squared plus 5x take away 4. All right, so first thing we have to do is identify the a, b, c. So your a is 6, okay, your b is 5, and then your c is negative 4. All right, so the next thing we have to do is to come up with two numbers. We'll come up with factors of negative 24, okay, but when you add those two numbers, it comes out to negative 5. All right, so how about factors of 24? Okay, how about we go 8 and 3. 8 times 3 is 24, right? We use 8 and 3. Okay, so 8 times 3 is positive 24. We need to have it a negative 24. So one of these numbers has to be a negative. Okay, but we want to add it to positive 5. So we want the 8 to be a positive number, because when you add with -3, okay, it's going to come out to positive 5. All right, so those are your two numbers. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to use those two numbers and we're going to try to write it out in factor form, okay? So the first number is a positive 8, so that's going to give you x plus 8, right? And then the second number is x minus 3. And then that equals to 0. Now, with this case, we are not done, okay? The last case we had a is 1. Remember your a was a 1. Now your a is a 6. So what you have to do, you guys remember that the first time we took 6 times -4, right? So 6 times -4, that's a times c. That'll give you -24. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to undo that. Okay, so we took 6 times -4. Now we have to divide back by 6. So we multiply by 6. Now we have to divide by 6. So you divide that by 6 and you divide this by 6. Okay, so now we're going to reduce. Okay, you have to reduce. So x plus, this one you reduce by 2. So when you reduce by 2, you get 4 all over 3, right? You divide each number by 2. Now here you reduce by 3, so you divide each number by 3. So it's going to be 1/2 equals to 0, right? Okay, so to get the factor, okay, we're not done. We still have to do one more thing. To get the factor is that you move the denominator, okay, to a coefficient of x. So you move those to a coefficient of x. So it's going to look like this now. So 3x, right, plus 4, that's one of the factors. And then the other one is 2x minus 1. So that's the other factor. Okay, so those are your two factors. Okay, and that's how you factor a quadratic equation or a trinomial, okay, when a is greater than 1, okay? Well, the next step is to set each factor equals to 0 and then solve for x. So we're going to set each one equals to 0 and then we're going to solve for what x is, okay? So one of the factors is 3x plus 4. So we're gonna do 3x plus 4 equals to 0. And then the other one is 2x minus 1 equals to 0. Okay, and then we solve here. So you can do this in your head. Solving for x, we minus 4 divide by 3, so we get -4/3. Here we add 1. Okay, add 1, divide by 2, so you get 1/2. Okay, and the last thing we got to do is write it in solution set. Okay, so x is going to be -4/3 and 1/2. Okay, so those are the two answers. Okay, so let's take a look at another one. So again, we're going to solve this by factoring. So step 1 is to move all terms to one side and set the equations equals to 0. So this is different compared to the previous two. So you have a 15 on the right hand side. You have to set it equals to 0. So you're going to have to minus 15 to make it come out to 0. And then you minus 15 to this side. Okay? So it's going to look like this. Ax squared, take away 2x, minus 15, and then 0 on the other side. Okay? See how this comes out to 0? All right, so that's the first thing you got to do is set it equals to 0. Step 2 is to factor. We're going to factor this using the slip and slide method, just like we did with the previous one, because a is greater than 1, okay? All right, so first thing we got to come up with is a times c. So slip and slide, we're going to take a times c. Okay, so that's a times -15. So a times c. A times -15 is going to give you -120. Okay, and then your b, you're going to write down your b. Your b is, okay, your b is negative 2. Okay, so now you have to come up with factors of negative 120, but when you add those two numbers, it comes out to negative 2. Okay, can you think of those two numbers? And we're going to use those two numbers to try to write it out in factor form. Okay, let's use 10 and 12. Those two numbers are pretty close to each other. So 10 and 12, right? So 10 times 12 is positive 120. We need to come out to negative 120. But when we add those two numbers, it comes out to negative 2. So we need the 12 to be a negative number. If that was a positive 2, then the 10 would be a negative number. All right, so now we're going to work with those two numbers. We're going to factor this using the slip and slide, so we're going to work with those two numbers. So we're going to write it out as x plus 10 because it's positive 10. Okay, and then x minus 12 because it's a negative 12. And then we're just going to set those equals to 0, okay, because we're solving for x. All right, so let's go back to this. You guys remember that we took the 8, we multiply a times c. Okay, so to get it back, we're going to have to divide by 8. So we have to divide the 10 by 8, and we have to divide the negative 12 by 8. So divide this by 8, and then divide this by 8. Okay, and then reduce it. So x we reduce by 2, so we get over 4. Okay, and then over here we reduce by 4. Okay, you divide each number by 4, you get 3 over 2. Okay, so you got to reduce it. And then after you reduce, you're going to bring the number. Okay, you're going to bring the denominator to the front. And then bring this denominator to the front. So it's going to look like this. 4x plus 5. Okay, is one of the factors. And then the other one is 2x minus 3. And then both those equals to 0. Okay, and then next thing we got to do is set each factor equals to 0. So we're going to set the 4x plus 5 equals to 0. And then we're going to set the 2x minus 3 equals to 0. And then we solve each one. So solving for x here, you're going to get negative 5 over 4. And then solving for x here, you're going to get 3 over 2. Okay? And then we're going to use those two numbers and put it in a solution set. So x is solution set, negative 5 over 4. And then 3 over 2. Okay, so those are your two answers. Okay, so we're going to take a look at another one, last one here. Okay, we're going to solve this by factoring. Okay, so first thing we have to do is set it equals to 0. So we're going to move the 2 minus 3x. We're going to get rid of the 2 minus 3x. These 2 minus 3x on the right-hand side. So to get rid of the 2, we minus 2. And to get rid of the negative 3, we add, to get rid of the minus 3x, we add 3x. Okay, so whatever we do to this side, we got to do it to the other side. So it's going to look like this. We got 4x squared plus 41x plus 98. And then we're going to bring these two over, right? Negative 2 plus 3x. Okay, and then these add up to 0. Okay, so we're going to simplify by combining like terms. So 4x squared stays the same. Here you have negative 41x with 3x. So that's going to give you 44x. And then you have 98 with negative 2 is going to give you positive 96. And that's going to equals to 0. Okay, and then we're going to factor this. We're going to factor the 4x squared plus 44x plus 96. It looks like if 4 can go into all of these numbers, then 4 is going to be your greatest common factor. Therefore, you can pull the 4 out to make it a lot easier to factor. Okay, so it looks like, yeah, we can pull the 4 out. So if I pull a 4 out, I'm left with x squared here. And then 4 goes into 44 11 times. And then 4 goes into 96 24 times. Okay, so those are your two factors for now. And then we're going to continue to factor the trinomial that is inside the parenthesis. We're going to factor that into two binomials. Okay, so you need to come up with factors of 24 that when you add them, you get 11. Okay, you see your AC. A times C is 24. And then your B is 11. So two numbers. So that has to do with 8 and 3. Your A is a 1. Okay, so if you divide this, if you divide the 8 by 1, it's not going to do anything. If you divide the 3 by 1, it's not going to do anything. Okay, so those are your two factors. So 8 and 3, so we're going to write it out. X plus 8, and then x plus 3. And then the 4. And the last thing we have to do is set each of these factors equals to 0. So we go 4 equals to 0. X plus 8 equals to 0. And then x plus 3 equals to 0. And then we're going to solve each one. This one is no good because 4 does not equal to 0. Because, okay, there's nothing to solve for. You have no variable. Here you minus 8. You get x equals negative 8. And here's you minus 3 to get the x by itself. So you get x equals negative 3. Okay, and then you finish this up by writing it in the solution set. So x equals to solution set, and then negative 8, and then negative 3. Okay, so that's how you solve quadratic equations by factoring. I hope the procedure step-by-step helped, and I hope you guys are able to understand these examples. I want to thank you guys for watching the video. Please help share and subscribe down below. Thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.